on, getting ready to do a little a reply to Peter Schwartz, a distinguished fellow at the Ayn Rand Institute, obviously an objectivist. It's an article in Huffington Post Politics under the blog. Anyways, let me just read what he's got to say here, and then I'll respond in kind. Actually, I first should preface, before I even start, by saying, you know, libertarians, anarchists, anarcho-capitalists, voluntarists, and objectivists have a tremendous amount of things in common. If you look at the philosophy, Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism, watch her interviews or videos, read her books, learn about what she stands for, what the philosophy of objectivism is all about, you'll recognize that you'll actually think, well, isn't this just libertarianism? Because yeah, they're very, very, very much similar. Now, the difference is Ayn Rand, once you start down the philosophical road, obviously philosophy is all about trying to eliminate contradictories in your intellect and knowledge and epistemology and ethics, and it's all about trying to, it's just like with science, right? You're trying to get to the point where you can eliminate any contradictions and make it so it's seamless. Now, Ayn Rand probably got 95% there, let's say 95% there with her objectivism, but she still withheld going following that her own logic to 100% consistency, which brings you to being a pure libertarian or an anarcho-capitalist or an anarchist. I suppose most people that did it, especially if you think when she was doing, when she was popular, when her books were popular, 40s, 50s, 60s and stuff, when she was out there and talking about, I mean, this is a woman that come from communist Russia, right? So to get to the point where she was, I mean, I have tremendous respect for the woman. Ever since I found out about her, she impresses me every time I see anything that she's ever done. Her books, just amazing. But she still believed in the state having a certain role, even though she completely admitted that this is the problem that we all have in the liberty movement when you start talking about philosophy, is ultimately, if you follow that logic all the way through, whether it's objectivism, libertarianism, anarchism, Ayn Rand, let's say there's 10 stops along the way till you get to the end. Ayn Rand stopped at the 9th stop and said, okay, I'm comfortable here. Anarchists and the most pure libertarians have made it all the way to that 10th stop. They're not going to stop at the 9th stop and say, okay, we know that the state is inherently illegitimate, immoral, and completely even illogical from a sensible or a moral standpoint. But we just don't want to. We just don't want to stop at that point like she did and say, okay, we're going to allow this mystical, very, very, very dangerous mystical entity. We're not going to stop at the 9th stop. We want to take this all the way to the end, because really what we're talking about, and like I say, for Ayn Rand to be where she was at in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, a lot of people that are pure libertarians or anarchists or anarcho-capitalists, they kind of rail at her and get pissed off at the fact that she didn't make it all the way to that 10th stop. But I'm not. When I think about the time that this woman was around, like I say, especially after World War II, blah, 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 blah. I mean, to get to the point where she was, especially coming from, communist Russia, I mean, good for you, woman. Good for you, Ayn Rand. I mean, there's, obviously the majority of the population at that time wouldn't even have been that far advanced in their thinking. Not even close. Not even to the first stop. First, second stop, most people maybe. If you go far enough into some of the centers, the independents, they might even been at the 4th or 5th stop. But Ayn Rand, she right on through. Made it all the way, like I say. So tremendous respect for her. But we're in 2015 now. So this Schwartz character is either a political opportunist, which is, always very much it's a pretty good guess to suggest that that's a potential reasoning behind his this article or his thought processes. Or maybe he just doesn't have the ability to use that full logic and consistency right through to the end, follow it through to the end. Maybe he's not brave enough to follow all the way through to the end because he still wants to be a populist and appeal to some people's. Now, I kind of get that away. But to write an article such as this, when I see it, I was like, really though? Basically, it's libertarianism versus liberty. Now let me start to read here. Okay, so now this is of course about the Republic. It's a response to Republican presidential candidate Ron Paul has been drawing criticism from his libertarian followers. A recent op-ed in the New York Times, for instance, chastises him for being insufficiently libertarian. His critics are particularly upset over his hawkish foreign policy, accusing him of abandoning the ideal of individual liberty. The reverse, however, is true. It is the libertarian movement itself, which, with its embrace of non-interventionism, that contradicts the idea of individual liberty. Modern libertarianism began in the 1960s and was born, it goes back beyond that, but anyway, well, I guess modern, okay, but either way, okay, I was born of an attempted marriage between capitalism and anarchism. Despite the fact that a state of anarchy presents a clear threat to the rights of every citizen. Okay, actually, I'm going to have to kind of stop and cover that little insinuation right there. Despite the fact that a state of anarchy presents a clear threat to the rights of every citizen. So what does anarchy mean? Defining the terms is what clarifies the mind and will help people understand. As we all know, anarchism and which this goes back to Latin or Greek, I believe it is. But if you look up, so it's anarchism basically is you don't believe in rulers. That's it. And it has nothing to do with, some people try to confuse that the anarchists are about having no rules. Now, some of the ANCOMs that they call themselves, the anarchist communists, some of that, I guess, more predominantly left-leaning ideology might fit under that camp, but every anarcho-capitalist that I'm aware of recognizes instantaneous, or libertarian, or voluntarist, recognize that rules have to be in place. That's just common sense. Just common sense. But there's a difference between having rules and a ruler. A ruler means someone, it's imposed from the top down and takes away all the other people's rights. Having rules is fine, but everybody has to follow the same rules. That's the whole point of, and that's really what anarchy is no rulers. Rules, yes. But if there's going to be rules, they have to be universal rules. There can't be rules for this person, but different rules for this person. That's, so, when he's making a statement such as, that anarchism presents a clear threat to the rights of every citizen, obviously that's bullshit. Because all it means is that anarchists say nobody should rule over anyone. So how's that a threat to every citizen? There's no threat. There's no one threat at all. Anyways, let's continue on. Libertarians claim that the means of achieving capitalism's goal of individual liberty is through anarchism. Murray Rothbard, widely acknowledged as the intellectual father of this movement, proudly labeled it anarcho-capitalism. A strong leftist anti-American orientation was present at the start. It's not leftist, although, see, this is the thing, when you're an anarchist, the positive attributes of some of the left ideology is obviously incorporated into it because, there are good aspects or some good aspects of left-leaning ideology, but it doesn't mean that they're left. They're just as, think about it. They're just as much, right-wingers are just as much against libertarians as left-wingers. So, it just depends on what you're talking about, whether it's social issues or economic issues. That's usually what it can be broken down to. But anyways, A strong leftist anti-American orientation was present at the start. For example, Rothbard contended that during the 20th century, the single most warlike, most interventionist, most imperialist government has been the United States. I mean, if he wants to take that as being leftist, that's non-interventionist. It has nothing to do with left. I mean, if some people on the left agree with that, which they do. I mean, think about the hippies and anti-war people of the 60s were considered left, but you can be a libertarian. It doesn't mean you're left to believe the same thing. It just means that you accept that particular premise. That's it. The libertarians' enemy was the CIA, the FBI, the military, the police, all of which were regarded as tools of an oppressive state. A state that had to be smashed so that the people could be free. And free meant the capacity to indulge in any whim without interference by the government. I mean, he's being a little bit... to indulge in any whim without... I mean, that's not true, obviously. And like I said, anyone that wants to learn about this stuff, listen to the people that consider themselves libertarians, anarcho-capitalists, voluntarists, and you'll see that this is absolute nonsense. Anyways, today's libertarians want political respectability and fewer still overt anarchists, but a tacit strain of anarchism still remains. The current platform of the Libertarian Party, for example, accommodates its anarchist contingent by stating that governments, when instituted, must not violate individual rights. Emphasis added. The platform also endorses jury nullification, which is de facto anarchism, as it asserts a right of juries to judge not only the facts, but also the justice of the law. Yeah, of course. Because as we know, laws are man-made by human beings that just write it on a piece of paper. So of course, a person has to use their own sensibility, moral, proper ethics, morality, right? You can't just go by, go back to, you just following orders. I mean, we all know, obviously, jury nullification, if someone's being charged, think about it. Of course, if you're a libertarian, anarcho-capitalist, voluntarist, and believe in individual rights, if someone's being charged for smoking a plant or possessing a plant, being criminally charged for it, yes, if you're on the jury, you should nullify the charge and claim the person to be not guilty, of course, because they're not guilty of any crime. Just because some arbiter or some authoritarian decided they wanted to write on a piece of paper that it was a crime, that doesn't make it a crime. That's just somebody's opinion. And now they have the power and force of the government to impose their opinion. But of course, yes. So that part I will definitely agree with. The libertarian disavowal of our anarchism is nominal only. Under a system of laissez-faire, government has the legitimate function of protecting its citizens against force or fraud. But libertarians regularly denounce that function, particularly in military matters. They regard military action as intrinsically illegitimate and call their viewpoint non-interventionism. For instance, Rand Paul's father and a former Libertarian Party presidential candidate, insists that America has no right to interfere with Iran's nuclear program. One can understand why they might want to become nuclear capable, if only to defend themselves and to be treated more respectfully. The Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity makes it an even more preposterous claim in opposing any intervention by us. Iran has not sought a nuclear weapon, and the country's leader declares such weapon contrary to Islam. But so think about it. Let's go back up to the top here. Under a system of laissez-faire, government has a legitimate function of protecting citizens against force or fraud. Right there, we all know this is why libertarians, anarchists, voluntarists will reject that sentence even, is because it's a contradictory statement. Government is force. So how can government, which is force, sure, force can be used to protect other people using force if you got a monopoly on that force, but that's just whoever's got the biggest, or whoever's the biggest bully on the block, right? Government is the biggest bully on the block, and then they're going to say, but we're going to be against violence, even though we're all about violence. Come on. This guy's supposed to, I don't know. Like I say, I wonder where these people, they still got a lot of contradictions running around in the brain. Anyways, I'm going to wrap this video up right now because I want to keep my videos under 15 minutes. I'm going to do another one for part 2 to finish this article. It's Canadian Libertarian. I love liberty.